I knew something was off when my horses started acting nervous near the southern fence line. I'd lived on this ranch for 6 peaceful years, just outside of Oak Mill Estates, a neighborhood that had slowly crept closer and closer to my land. I stayed out of their business. They stayed out of mine. Until they didn't. The fence showed up overnight, tall, black iron bars stretching across the only road that connected my ranch to the main county road. My name's Marcus Finley. I'm a black rancher, a quiet man with a lot of respect for land and space, but what I don't respect, petty power grabs. I drove my truck down the gravel path and stopped short at the new gate. There was no keypad, no lock I recognized, just cold steel and smug intent. That's when I saw her. Khloe Osborne, president of the Oak Mill HOA, stood on the other side of the gate holding a clipboard like it was a badge. Mid-50s, platinum blonde bob, sunglasses too big for her face, and a permanent expression like she smelled something bad. She was surrounded by 2 other board members who looked like they'd never lifted anything heavier than a HOA violation notice. I stepped out of my truck. "Khloe," I said flatly. "What the hell is this?" She tilted her head, voice sweet like a spoiled peach. "Mr. Finley, this is for community safety. We've had complaints about your animals wandering too close to our properties." The board voted unanimously to install this gate to prevent further issues. I narrowed my eyes. "You fenced in my property. That's illegal." Khloe flipped her clipboard open. "Actually, according to the revised boundary lines filed by Oak Mill Estates last month, this road now falls within our jurisdiction." "You mean the road I built and maintain?" I stepped closer. "You've lost your damn mind if you think you can fence me in." She gave a fake chuckle. "You're welcome to request a key, but only homeowners within Oak Mill are granted full access. Non-members like yourself are, subject to board discretion." I stared at her, stunned. "You blocked my only exit." Khloe smiled like she'd just won a prize pig at a county fair. "You'll manage." Rules are rules. That was it. That was the moment I decided I was done playing polite. I didn't yell, I didn't threaten. I just turned around, walked back to my truck, and drove the long way around through the backwoods. It took 40 minutes instead of 5, but I needed the time to think. They thought they could trap me. They forgot I'm not the type who likes being cornered. 3 days later, I was at the county clerk's office. I dug through records, traced property lines, and found something interesting. That tiny sliver of land where the gate sat. It wasn't officially owned by Oak Mill Estates. It had been left to a defunct development company that went bankrupt 3 years ago. The land was in limbo, up for sale at a tax auction no one had noticed until I did, so I bought it, all of it. The quarter-acre strip of land with the only gate entrance into Oak Mill Estates now belonged to me. And I had the only key. The next morning, I pulled up in my truck and parked just shy of the new gate, where Khloe and her board members were already gathered again. This time, they weren't holding clipboards, they were holding coffee cups and chatting like it was a casual brunch spot. I got out, casually swinging a manila envelope in one hand. "Morning," I said, surveying the trio. "Guess what I bought yesterday?" Khloe turned around, her expression briefly confused before she caught sight of the envelope. "Whatever it is, I doubt it concerns. I now own the land this gate sits on," I said, peeling back the flap. "Filed the deed with the county, got the stamp and everything." "You're standing on my property." Her jaw clenched. One of the board members, a tall guy in golf gear, stepped forward. "That's not possible. Oak Mill's boundaries were redrawn through the proper channels. We had attorneys review it." I held up the official parcel map. "Your surveyor misread the zoning overlay. This strip of land was never transferred to the HOA. Belonged to a defunct LLC that defaulted on its taxes. County posted it publicly. I picked it up for less than a used lawnmower." Khloe's voice sharpened. "You can't just seize control of our access point. That's obstruction." "No, obstruction would be what you did blocking off a public access road without a permit. You can call it safety, but I've already spoken with the county roads supervisor. He's not happy." Neither is the fire marshal. Her face paled slightly. The fire marshal? Yeah, I said, pulling another paper from my envelope. Turns out you need at least 2 unobstructed exits per subdivision over 50 homes. You have won this one. Or had. She reached for the paper, but I tucked it back into the envelope. You'll get your copy through official channels. I've already submitted a complaint to the County Code Enforcement Office. They'll be here tomorrow to inspect the gate. Khloe's voice dropped. You're making this personal. No, I said. You did that when you tried to trap me on my own land. This is just me walking through the doors you opened. I got back in my truck and backed away slowly, watching her scramble to call someone as I drove off. By the time I made it back home, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I let it ring out, then another. I ignored that too. Late that night, under a clear sky and with the coyotes howling in the distance, I installed a second lock on the gate. This one was mine. I also added a trail camera facing the road, motion activated, infrared, and linked directly to my phone. I wasn't about to let anyone tamper with what I now legally owned. The next day, a white county vehicle rolled up just after noon. A middle-aged inspector named Don stepped out, clipboard in hand and a deep furrow in his brow. He didn't even make it 10 feet before Khloe came marching up the road with a whole parade of HOA board members behind her. I'll start right here, Don said, pointing at the gate. This was constructed without a road alteration permit. That's a violation. Khloe tried to interrupt. We had a vote. Votes don't override county infrastructure law, he interrupted. You didn't notify the Planning Commission, didn't submit blueprints, and didn't post the required notice to nearby landowners per state code. That includes Mr. Finley. She flinched at that. Don walked over to the gate, examining the concrete footings and metal posts. This is a structural installation. You're looking at fines starting at $500 per day per obstruction, and you'll need to remove it within 72 hours or face a civil injunction. Khloe's voice cracked. But he locked it. Don pointed to me. He owns the land. You built on it without permission. That's trespassing compounded by unauthorized construction. If he wanted to press charges, he could. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. That night, I got my first taste of retaliation. Someone dumped a pile of gravel across the old service road that ran through the woods, my only alternate exit. It wasn't subtle, and the tire tracks leading back to Oak Mill were still fresh in the mud. I called the sheriff. Deputy Langston showed up before dark, a tall man with a calm demeanor and a notepad that didn't miss a thing. He knelt down by the gravel and looked at the tire tracks. Looks like a trailer load, he said. Deliberate obstruction of egress, that's a problem. I nodded. I've got motion-activated cameras along the service road. Haven't needed them in a while, but I'll pull the footage. He looked up. You've got footage? Multiple angles, I said, and I've already backed it up. 2 days later, Deputy Langston returned with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We ID'd the vehicle. Belongs to a landscaping company contracted by Oak Mill Estates. They claimed it was a mistake, said they meant to drop it at a lot under renovation. I raised an eyebrow. At 9 at night, exactly, he said. I'm recommending charges for criminal mischief and reckless endangerment. Blocking a private access road, especially one used for livestock transportation, falls under both. I felt something loosen in my chest, but I wasn't done yet. I filed a formal cease and desist through my attorney, demanding the HOA remove the gate within the county's time frame or face a civil suit. Then I went a step further. I applied for a conditional use permit to install a livestock crossing and utility access where the gate stood. Since I owned the land, the county approved it without hesitation. 2 weeks passed. Oak Mill tried to stall, filing bogus counterclaims and requesting extensions, but they didn't have the documentation to back any of it up. The county wasn't interested in excuses. They were interested in violations. On day 71, I showed up with a contractor and a backhoe. Khloe was already there, arms crossed and eyes narrowed. You can't destroy community property. "It's not your property," I said, handing her a copy of the court order. And the judge agrees. The backhoe fired up, its diesel engine drowning out the protests behind me. By sunset, the gate was gone, cut, hauled, and stacked neatly on my land. I left the pile there just off the road with a sign mounted above it that read, "Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be reported." That sign wasn't just for show. The next morning, I caught one of Oak Mill's board members trying to move the pile. He stopped cold when he saw the sheriff's cruiser pulling up behind him. Deputy Langston leaned out the window. "You really want to go down that road?" The man backed away, hands raised. Khloe didn't show her face after that. Word spread fast through the subdivision. Some residents started showing up at my gate not with complaints but with apologies. One even brought me a pie. Seems not everyone in Oak Mill liked what the board had been doing, and just like that, the tide started turning. The first letter arrived folded neatly in an unmarked envelope, slid under the door of my barn like it was a secret. No return address. Inside was a single line typed in bold, "You pushed too far. You won't be warned again." I read it twice, then burned it in the wood stove. 2 days later, the power to my well pump went out. At first, I figured it was just a fuse. But the whole breaker box had been tampered with, the lock was snapped, wires yanked loose, and the grounding line had been cut clean. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. I called the sheriff immediately. Deputy Langston came out with a county electrician who confirmed it was sabotage. "No animals, no storm, just deliberate damage. Someone wanted your water offline," Langston said, crouching beside the panel. "That grounding wire's not something a random kid would know to cut." I didn't need him to say it out loud. This wasn't a prank or a warning anymore, it was escalation. I installed new locks on every utility box and gate, then wired up exterior lights on motion sensors, bright halogens that lit up the property like a stadium. I mounted additional cameras along the fence line, overlapping views with timestamps synced to my laptop. If they tried again, I'd have them on record from 5 angles. Then I filed a formal complaint with the State Public Safety Board. Sabotaging a private agricultural well wasn't just vandalism, it was a felony. I knew things had turned when I got a call from a journalist in Austin. She said she'd heard about a rural dispute outside Oak Mill and wanted to know if I'd be willing to talk. I told her I wasn't interested in drama. She told me she'd already uncovered something I might want to know about. "The HOA filed a zoning petition last year," she said. "They claimed your road was abandoned and unmaintained, which let them argue it was unused right-of-way. That's how they justified the gate internally." "They lied," I said flatly. "They did more than lie," she replied. "They submitted forged maintenance logs. I compared them with county records. The HOA's version shows roadwork that never happened. The county has no record of permits or crews. Someone fabricated the entire thing." She emailed me the documents. I read every line. They'd even listed a contractor who'd been dead for 2 years. I forwarded everything to my attorney, who wasted no time filing a formal fraud report with the Texas Department of Transportation and the State Attorney General's office. This wasn't just civil now, it was criminal. That same evening, a white SUV parked just outside my property line. It didn't move for hours, just idled with its headlights off. I recorded the plate, handed it over to Langston, and started carrying my rifle a little closer to the door. The next morning, I spotted orange survey flags staked along my southern pasture. Thin plastic strips fluttering in the breeze, about 20 of them marking a line that made no sense. They weren't utility markers. They were boundary stakes. Khloe wasn't trying to block my road anymore, she was trying to move in. I reached out to the county land assessor's office. They hadn't sent anyone. No permits had been filed. No development plans approved, which meant someone was trying to lay claim to a portion of my land without going through the legal channels. I pulled the survey flags, packed them into a box, and delivered them directly to the sheriff's department. Langston opened the box, took one look, and said, "That's it. We're moving this up." He coordinated with the county DA, and within a week, subpoenas were issued for the Oak Mill HOA's internal records. Computers, meeting minutes, and financial statements were seized by court order. I heard later that one of the board members tried to sneak a hard drive out during the seizure and got stopped at the parking lot gate by deputies. A week after the raid, Khloe was arrested on felony charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, falsifying public documents, and criminal trespass. 2 other board members were also named in the case. The HOA's legal representation collapsed overnight when their law firm dropped them as clients. I didn't celebrate. I just got back to work, but the damage had been done. Oak Mill Estates was in chaos. Some residents came by to apologize again, but this time they brought more than words. They brought statements. Screenshots of HOA emails, minutes from meetings never filed with the county, and photos of the initial gate construction showing unlicensed workers hired under the table. It was a gold mine. I passed everything to the DA's office. The case kept growing. Turns out, the HOA had been operating a slush fund, siphoning emergency maintenance fees from residents for years, and funneling the money into side projects including the illegal gate and the attempted annexation of my land. They'd used intimidation to silence dissent, threatened fines for imaginary violations, and even blacklisted homeowners from neighborhood events if they spoke up. The state attorney general launched a full investigation under the RICO statute, yes, the same one used for organized crime. Because that's what it was. A criminal enterprise under the banner of a homeowners association. 3 months later, Khloe stood trial in county court. I sat in the front row every day, boots planted, arms crossed, and eyes steady. She tried to play the victim. Claimed she was protecting property values, said I was the aggressor. But the evidence was a hammer and it came down hard. The jury didn't take long. Guilty. She was sentenced to 5 years probation, banned from serving on any HOA board again, and ordered to pay restitution to both me and the community. The other 2 board members took plea deals. The court stripped the HOA of its authority pending reorganization under state supervision. I didn't say a word as she was led out in cuffs, but she glanced at me once on her way past, not with anger, with disbelief. Like she still couldn't understand how someone like me had beaten her. That's the problem with people like Khloe. They mistake silence for weakness. They think a calm man won't fight if you push hard enough, but I didn't need to shout. I just needed the truth, the law, and a little patience. By summer, the old gate was gone. The land was clear. Oak Mill Estates had installed a new board made up of residents who actually cared about the community instead of controlling it. They came by one afternoon, unannounced, and asked if I'd be willing to attend a town hall to talk about land rights and rural boundaries. I said I'd think about it. Instead, I hosted it on my ranch. People brought chairs, food, even a band. And for the first time since the whole mess started, Oak Mill and I weren't on opposite sides of a fence. We were neighbors again, only this time everyone knew exactly where the lines were and who not to cross. The first autumn rain came down in sheets, soaking the red clay roads and turning the outer fields into a slick mess. I didn't mind. It gave the earth a chance to breathe after the chaos. Most folks around here use the quiet seasons to patch fences or rotate livestock. I used mine to finish what had been started. The new Oak Mill Board, with its members elected by actual residents instead of hand-picked volunteers, sent me an invitation for a sit-down. Not a confrontation, a conversation. Different tone entirely. They wanted to talk about formalizing a mutual easement, something that hadn't been offered before because the previous regime had been too busy trying to steal land instead of respecting it. I met them at a neutral spot, the county's historical Grange Hall. Nothing fancy, just a long wooden table and chairs that creaked when you leaned too far back. The new president, a woman named Rebecca Castillo, shook my hand like she meant it. No fake smiles, just direct, calm professionalism. She was a former school administrator, and it showed in the way she kept the meeting on track. "We're not here to undo the past," she said, spreading out the updated maps and legal drafts. "We're here to make sure nothing like that ever happens again." I read through the proposal. It was tight. Clean language, no buried clauses or sneaky fine print. My land remained my land, no annexation, no shared jurisdiction. The easement simply acknowledged the existing road mine and granted official access to emergency services and residents in case of natural disasters. That was it. I nodded. "This works." Rebecca leaned forward. "We'd also like to create a joint community liaison position, someone to represent properties that border the subdivision. They'd attend board meetings quarterly, make sure everyone's voice is heard." "I'm not looking for a title," I said. "It doesn't come with one," she replied. "Just a seat at the table, consider it a safeguard." I took a moment. "I'll do it, but only if it's written into the bylaws, not just a courtesy invitation." Rebecca didn't hesitate. "Agreed." We signed the agreement that afternoon, and I walked out of that hall with something Oak Mill had never offered before, respect backed by legal commitment. But the story didn't end with paperwork. 2 months later, during an unrelated audit of the county zoning board, an investigator uncovered a series of flagged emails connected to the original Oak Mill petition, the one that falsely claimed my road was abandoned. The emails had been encrypted, but the metadata revealed something ugly. Someone inside the county office had helped Khloe forge access logs. A low-level zoning technician named Russell Greer had accepted payment cash, unreported from the HOA's discretionary account. In return, he helped backdate maintenance entries and removed logs showing my road's regular use. That made the illegal gate seem justified on paper. When the state's Public Integrity Unit got hold of the evidence, they opened a formal investigation. I was contacted to give a statement, which I did under oath. What followed was a chain reaction. Greer was arrested on charges of public corruption and tampering with government records, but he didn't go quietly, he cut a deal. In exchange for leniency, he turned over encrypted backups from Khloe's private email server, something the county seizure hadn't fully uncovered. Those backups revealed a separate scheme entirely. Khloe had been siphoning HOA funds through inflated vendor invoices, specifically landscaping and security services. The companies listed didn't exist, and the bank accounts they paid into traced back to a shell corporation registered in her niece's name. The DA expanded the case. More subpoenas followed. The ex-treasurer of the HOA was brought in for questioning and confessed to forging reimbursement receipts. One of the former board members, a man named Clifton Madsen, had used HOA funds to pay off personal debts, including a lien on a vacation rental in Colorado. It wasn't just fraud now, it was large-scale embezzlement. The final tally, over $280,000 misappropriated. The state filed charges in district court: racketeering, wire fraud, money laundering, the works. I wasn't present for the trial. I didn't need to be, but Langston kept me in the loop. He told me the prosecution's closing argument was one of the most scathing he'd seen in all his years. They didn't just betray their neighbors, the prosecutor had said. They weaponized a system meant to serve. And they did it for power and greed. Khloe was sentenced to 12 years in state prison, no parole for the first 8. Madsen received 5. The treasurer got 3 with mandatory restitution. And the niece who'd acted as a front for the shell company received a suspended sentence in exchange for testimony. The HOA was placed under court-monitored probation. Every financial transaction had to be reported to a state-appointed auditor for 5 years. The subdivision was ordered to repay the stolen funds via a special assessment, but most residents didn't complain. They were just glad the rot had been cut out back home. Things got quiet again, real quiet. The kind of quiet that lets you hear the wind move through the grass and the horses breathe easy at night. I fixed up the old grain shed and converted it into a workshop. Built a new fence line along the west slope, not because I had to, but because I finally had the time. I started getting visitors, too. Other landowners from further out. Folks curious about how I'd handled the HOA without going nuclear. One of them, an older man named Henry Torres, asked me if I'd ever considered writing it all down. I told him I didn't see the point. "You don't write it for you," he said. "You write it so the next person knows they're not alone." Maybe he had a point. Later that winter, I got an envelope in the mail. This one had a return address, the state of Texas. Inside was a formal commendation for civic contribution, signed by the Attorney General and my district representative. Apparently, the case had helped push forward a new bill to increase transparency in HOA operations statewide. The legislation passed unanimously. I framed it and hung it in the barn, not out of pride, just as a reminder: power unchecked always rots. But it doesn't stand a chance against truth, patience, and folks who refuse to be pushed. The land's still mine. The road's still open, and the gate. That pile of twisted metal rusted out in the back pasture months ago. I left it there on purpose. Not as a warning, as a monument.